I want to talk about some recent updates when it comes to VeChain, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Did you know that at least like as of late, right? Allegedly there was 5 validators, each locking up the maximum 600 million VET, and they have joined basically. That's pretty impressive. Keep in mind, I'm not talking about like $600 million. I'm talking about 600 million VET. But that's the max that a validator could do anyways. And again, if there's 5 of them, and if we do some basic math, 600 million times 5, that's 3 billion VET. And if we consider the total supply of VET being around 86 billion, and again, recently seeing around 3 billion VET basically locked up, I mean, isn't that pretty impressive? Now I get it. People like to say, oh, who cares? 3 billion out of like, let's say the total supply being around 86 billion, that's a drop in the bucket. Well, not really. Sure, it's not even 10%, but that's pretty cool at the end of the day, seeing that, especially as of late, because let's face it, ever since the start of 2026, VeChain hasn't been doing the best in terms of the charts, not in terms of the fundamentals, but in terms of the charts. But still seeing something like that, I think that's a pretty respectable thing, actually, at the end of the day. And I think it showcases how some people still do believe in VeChain. Now, so do I, but I'm saying when I take a look at this right here, I just find it to be pretty fascinating, actually, because at the end of the day, right, if we take a look at VeChain, sure, people like to say, oh, the pullback's been so bad and all this, but I can view this in two ways. There's like two different lenses. One's a 3D lens, one's a 2D lens. What do I mean by this? This is just an analogy, right? If things are low, I can say, okay, first of all, it's not that good. I could say that. But on the flip side, I can say, okay, what happens if I still believe in it right now, and let's say it maybe hypothetically goes back to a point we've seen it reach before? Like for instance, if we take a look at, let's say, VET, right? Back in December of 2024, we saw the market cap reach around 5 billion pretty much. But as of right now, we're still around 600 million in terms of market cap. Isn't that kind of ridiculous? So again, we're almost 9 times lower than that, basically. If it goes back to that moment, wow, I'm going to Applebee's. I'm going to Sizzler, actually, because that would be pretty legendary. Which, again, people may be saying, how is that legendary? We saw that back in, December 2024. Yeah, I get that. But from where we are as of right now, if we could go back to that moment, I think it's pretty legendary, actually, because that's pretty impressive. I mean, okay, we're over 8 times lower than that. But the thing is, Ethereum is not around, let's just say for simplicity's sake, around 8 times lower than where it was slightly over a year ago. It's just not. Neither is Bitcoin, by the way. So the way I take a look at it is, sure, I mean, there is Bitcoin out there, there is Ethereum out there, but if we're assuming maybe in a random hypothetical, they could only just go back to the moment in which they were back in, let's say, December of 2024, would I choose VET, Ethereum, or Bitcoin? Now, in that instance, I don't know why I would even want to consider Ethereum or maybe Bitcoin hypothetically. But that's just kind of the way I take a look at it, right? Because if things could only just go back to where they were back in December 2024, yeah, I don't see any reason for me to choose something that's like slightly just lower than that. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose something that's quite far away from that because, again, we're assuming that if they could go back to that moment, I'd like to believe in something that is hypothetically low. So then the journey sometimes is more impressive, sometimes in terms of percentage, but ultimately only time will tell. However, when I take a look at VeChain, I guess sometimes people like to tell me that it's really bad, but here's the thing. In terms of pure fundamentals, I actually don't think VeChain is bad, in my opinion. The charts may showcase a different thing, but in terms of actual fundamentals, I don't think about it that way. Because if we just assume, right, there's many businesses out there in the world and how some of them potentially could need, I guess, an improvement when it comes to supply chain management. Maybe, right? But what is VeChain focused on? Primarily speaking, supply chain management. So literally that market sector right there is not going to be based off of like trends or cool factor or just what's trendy at the time. No. Supply chain management was something people cared about many, many years ago. It's something people care about as of right now in terms of businesses, and I'm pretty sure supply chain management will be continued to be cared about moving forward for many years to come. So I think VeChain is more so focused on like an evergreen market where it's focused on a market that I think has more of the longevity because it's not based off a trend or like, something that's cool. Because if a project out there is focused on a trend or focused on just cool factor, what happens if it no longer becomes cool? What happens if the trend is no longer trendy or trending, right? What happens? Sometimes the project could, figuratively speaking, just evaporate in a sense where no one really cares about it anymore. Nothing really happens to the project, and that's kind of it. Just stays like that. Then, nothing really happens, right? No development, nothing really going on. But if it's focused on a market that actually has longevity, if it's actually focused on a market that actually has substance, in my opinion, it may not be the coolest, but at least it has substance. I like that better for a long-term mindset. This is my point of view. So when it comes to VeChain, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad project. It may be considered boring by some people, it may not be considered cool, but I do like the market that they're focused on. And if we take a look at it as well, is the VeChain Tor blockchain as popular as like Solana or something like that? No, it's not, right? But the thing is, it doesn't really need to because, in my opinion, the niche when it comes to VeChain seems to be a little bit different. Furthermore, the VeChain Tor blockchain, it could be argued as, of course, not being the most popular, but I think something that can't really be argued about when it comes to that is its reliability, allegedly, because supposedly ever since 2018, we're talking about zero network outages, literally zero. Not one network outage, not two, not three, literally zero. That's pretty impressive. Usually other projects out there, we see a lot of them having network outages. Sometimes, things go on. And it kind of makes sense. When things are first starting, usually things are not perfect, right? But the fact that ever since 2018, supposedly zero network outages when it comes to the VeChain Tor blockchain, that's kind of ridiculous, I think, in a good way, because I would expect maybe a couple ever since 2018, right? But no, apparently there isn't any. So that's pretty legendary, I think, in my opinion. And I think from here on out, I do like the exposure when it comes to VeChain a lot better than before because VeChain, we already know they have close ties with the UFC. We already know about that partnership, right? But now, because the UFC is on Paramount, I feel like it just has way more kind of attention. That's the thing. Because back then, people would have to do the pay-per-view model for the big UFC events, but then now they don't have to do that through the Paramount thing, right? Because again, UFC signed a deal with Paramount. Now, through Paramount, I could just watch the UFC in a sense where I do find that to be pretty fascinating. And I think, again, it just brings more kind of eyeballs to the UFC, in which case, indirectly, I think could maybe benefit something like VeChain because now VeChain has more exposure, right? People literally see VeChain at times when they watch the UFC, in my opinion. If VeChain's there and people do watch the UFC, they can literally see that, right? So again, I don't view it as like a bad thing, actually, as to what I'm seeing when it comes to VeChain. I feel like the fundamentals are still good, in my opinion, in my perspective, but the charts are low. But if the charts are low, that's what I want to focus on the most because the lower something is, in theory, the ceiling is farther away. If the ceiling is farther away, the journey is farther away. But I do literally want that to be the case because preferably if I'm dollar cost averaging, I would like it to be as low as possible. I can't control that, but if that happens to be the case, yeah, I have no complaints on my end. But besides that point, I'll be sure to make more updates when it comes to VeChain moving forward. So hopefully y'all stay tuned for that. I just want to say thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.